Throughout my own life and fitness journey, I have had the privilege of meeting incredible people who've shared valuable insights on mindset, health, fitness, and spiritual growth. The profound impact of this knowledge on my own life has inspired me to share it with all of you. I'm Erica Sweeney, host and founder of My Fit Tribe podcast. Join me as we explore inspiring conversations with experts, thought leaders, and everyday heroes who offer their stories and practical tips to help you on your own journey. From nutrition and fitness to mental well-being and personal or spiritual growth, our mission is to empower you to take charge of your health and live your best life. We are more than just a podcast, we are a community. Through coaching, a wealth of shared knowledge, and a strong support network, we are here to guide and encourage you every step of the way. Come be a part of our tribe. This conversation has been long overdue, and I'm excited to welcome back to the My Fit Tribe podcast our favorite nurse practitioner, Traci Eliszewski. I brought her on for her expertise in dissecting peptides, breaking down what they are, how they can benefit you, and the risks that come with using them without proper monitoring or medical guidance. We could have talked about this for hours, so if you or someone you know is currently on or considering a GLP1 or other peptides, I hope these questions help guide you toward informed and confident decisions. Today, my guest for the podcast is Traci Eliszewski, regenerative medicine nurse practitioner at Forum Health here in Madison. You may remember Traci from episode 5 where we talked about menopause, a topic that is very important for, I think, all of us to share. But I've wanted to have her back for some time to talk about peptides because it is in the news, everyone seems to be on it, and I have so many questions about both sides of the aisle on it. But before we get into peptides, I have a few things I want to catch up with Traci on. Traci is a new mom of her third child. Congratulations, Traci.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We were talking a little bit before the podcast about being tired because being a mom of 3, even though they're adults, I'm still tired. I'm still recovering from the last 32 years. So tell me how life has been trying to balance being a mom of 3 and a wife and running Forum and taking care of your clients and all the things.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, if I could summarize it, it's beautiful chaos is the 2 words I love to use. I think it's fantastic, phenomenal, a little bit tiring at times, but I love what I do for my job, which makes it very easy to stay motivated and continue to learn while soaking up all those little moments with my kids too. So.
And they go so fast, so it's so important to be able to soak those up. So good for you for acknowledging that because it's easy to get stuck in the autopilot mode where you just go, 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 and you've stopped to take a moment to enjoy it all.
Absolutely. I think I've learned that now with the third child, right? I definitely am learning that now more than I probably did with the last 2 because, I'm older and wiser, right?
Well, and you parent different. I remember with my first child, the pacifier would fall on the ground and you go boil it right away.
Yes.
By the third one, you just pop it in your mouth and
100%.
stick it in there.
100%. Absolutely.
And then the other thing I wanted to touch on as well, because again, our last episode with you, we talked about menopause and we talked about HRT. So the FDA, they have just reversed that black box warning on HRT. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like how phenomenal is that we finally have that acknowledgement and that public notification that it's safe.
Yeah. I mean, call it post hormones for me here, but I think what a monumental day, right? And providers that have been advocating this for longer than I've been alive, right? So I mean, what an amazing day that it finally happened. Again, for me, I don't know if you saw my last Instagram post, but what a beautiful day for the future generation. And for a lot of my patients that I've been trying to, tell them and educate how important this is. But I do feel a lot, so much sadness for the women for the last few decades that have been deprived of this, right? And, again, going forward, super, super exciting. But I'm hopeful that it's a turning point for a lot of us from the provider perspective of how important and how important these hormones are for us as we get older.
Do you think now that this change has occurred, that the medical professionals who are in that standard realm of care will change their approach towards it? I mean, even though it's yes, it's okay, there still might be some resistance just because of their experience or what they have been taught, whatever. So what type of transition do you think it will be for patients who are looking for that option now?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be like a floodgate of like, okay, these are safe now. Like, and it shouldn't be, right? There's a lot of nuances to prescribing hormones very safely and effectively and doing it the right way, right? But I what I hope changes is the conversation and the way that we're taught about hormones in school specifically, so that newer doctors and even doctors who are practicing, right? I always share this with like I probably have more than 20 physicians and providers as my patients, right? And some of them are OBGYNs, right? So like, I think for us and that conversation that we have too is I think the conversation and the way that we teach hormones, I'm hopeful that with this change from the FDA is going to just start that conversation earlier, and just be more open to providers who are already in practice.
That's a great point. And for our listeners with the HRT, they are recommending that, women who are within 10 years of menopause, is what I'm reading, that's where it's most beneficial to be able to start it. So can you just, again, real quick, just touch base on who might be listening to know that they would be a good candidate for exploring that option?
Yeah, I think that conversation that I have with patients initially is the most important one, right? The 10-year study, the 10-year, pre-post, that definitely too, there's a lot of studies to show, how important it is. I mean, honestly, like there's studies shown 20 years post-menopause where a little bit of progesterone, a little bit of estrogen can be helpful in cognitive impairment, right? With people who are already showing signs of early, dementia or cognitive impairment. So, I think for me personally, that again, it comes down to those little nuances of prescribing hormones that conversation is open to me at any age, right? Like, and the way that you prescribe them, the route that you prescribe them, their family history, their personal history, those are all those little conversations that when you come to somebody who's been prescribing hormones or continues to research and, continue to mentor with, people and providers who've been doing hormones and prescribing hormones much longer than I have. But I think it should be an open conversation at any age, whether you're 10 years prior, 10 years post. The latest study showed that, in that perimenopausal time where you're not actually in menopause yet, even further benefits, right? So, but again, I mean, it depends on what you're coming in, what you're looking for hormones to do for women. I think just keeping in mind that, there is a benefit to having some estrogen versus no estrogen in the body, but it is really kind of keeping those receptors balanced, which is the most important thing. But the answer to your question is, I think it's a discussion at any age, honestly, but it is very, there's a lot of, like I said, little things that need to be big things that need to be discussed, but little nuances that have to be discussed as well.
That's a great point. And again, the point of HRT is so that you feel better. I mean, as you get older and those hormones change, it can be wicked, wicked awful.
Yeah.
I just think, again, menopause is one of those things that we have decided that we can't talk about. Finally, there's conversations out there about not only the treatments, but the symptoms and acknowledging that your body's going through those changes. And so I just encourage any woman who's having difficulties and not feeling well, that's a good place to start to go find a provider who can have that conversation with you.
Yeah. And I would say feel better, but for me, honestly, from a cellular medicine standpoint, it's way more than that, right? It's prevention of osteoporosis as much as we can help that. It's prevention of Alzheimer's dementia, cardiovascular risk. Estrogen is very important for your heart. So I think even more than, absolutely, obviously feeling better, especially if you're going through those changes and you're, the hot flashes, night sweats, the vasomotor symptoms, which it's definitely on approved for, right? It's also all those other nuances or those other things, that happens in the body. That from my perspective, that's what I'm going from a preventative health approach for sure.
That's a great point. Yeah. So now that we're talking about preventative health approach, let's dive into peptides. So again, This is, I don't say it's controversial because I feel like there's more people who are for it than represent the other side of it. But I'm going to challenge you a little bit on it because I have questions on both sides. So
Totally.
Let's just start off. Can you explain what exactly a peptide is?
Yes. So peptides in general, right? They're short chains of amino acids and they make up the building blocks of proteins. Okay. They act as like a mini protein around the body to act as like a messenger molecule in the body is the best way to describe it. They do certain things in the body depending on what peptide you're taking or, prescribing. But peptides in general do different things around the body. Some burn fat, some build muscle, repair muscle, whatever, regulate inflammation, help blood sugar stabilization, etc. The body itself makes over 7,000 naturally occurring peptides every single day that we just know of, okay? Insulin is a peptide. Oxytocin is a peptide. Growth hormone releasing hormones, these are peptides. So they are very specific in where they bind, right? So think about in comparison, and again, just kind of trying to take a step back and like, because it gets really kind of scientific-y. So there's like lots of avenues that we can go. But for your listeners, I think it's just, they're very direct cell signaling molecules. You look at a hormone, hormones are bigger molecules, right? They have to like sit on the cell and they help the cell specifically do what it's supposed to do, whether that's build muscle or, grow hair or whatever that is, right? Where peptides are very directly, right? They don't require that large molecule, but they'll go to that cell and they can help that cell do what it's supposed to do a little bit more effectively. So we make them every single day. And I think that's why I was driven to, as a provider, 5.5 years ago, to really start studying peptides, because body's already doing this. As we get older, or as, you get hit with a virus or bacteria or whatever it may be, right? The body might not do it as effectively. So I think that's where I come from, at the perspective of, okay, really important to learn about these things because they're not going away. You're going to hear more and more people talk about it. I always say, like, social media in itself is a fantastic, amazing thing, but it's hard sometimes because everybody's an expert. And I feel like you see peptides come across, like everyone's talking about peptides, whether it's a supplement company or it's just a hot word, right? It's a very sexy word right now to talk about peptides. And I think that's one of the things from a provider that studied for only 5 years, right? I'm not even an expert in peptides. And so I think if a provider or somebody's called themselves an expert, like that's kind of a scary person, right? Like you really have to continue to mentor and understand like where these things, what they're doing in the body, but everything's changing, every day too. So, but peptides in general, you're going to continue to learn about them. You're going to continue to hear about them. But there's a difference between a supplement peptide and a peptide that you're getting from a provider prescription peptide, because those are ones that mimic what the bodies or actually have what the body has already. Those peptides are in the body already, versus a supplement. And again, this is not a knock against any supplement company, but just because peptide's a sexy word, you're seeing people like, oh, I take, peptides and et cetera. Yes, if you can label anything a peptide, essentially, if it's a string of amino acids, right? But there's a complete difference there. And I come up to that conversation a lot.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big part of what I wanted to address. So you and I have had that conversation before about peptides too, and about how it's, what your body creates naturally anyways. But as you mentioned, everything from shampoo to skincare to you name it, clothes. No, I'm just kidding. But
totally.
So many things
Yes.
say peptide. And I'm guilty of it too. I have some supplements and some shampoos that said peptides, which doesn't make sense to me. Because obviously it's not the peptides that my body's generating, because my body's not a shampoo.
Totally.
But it's very confusing to the consumer
It is.
And you hear that peptide is good and that will help you, and then to see it everywhere. So let's just kind of narrow in a little bit on what you said about getting it from provider. What makes a difference? What makes what you do, getting that peptide that you prescribe, different from what you would see someplace else?
Totally. So when you're actually truly like where peptides discovered, right? Like I always feel like the cool things are always started kind of in the bodybuilding world, right? Like they start using peptides and other things in the body industry, and then eventually it kind of like comes to medicine, right? Or you have really good doctors that start utilizing these things in their patients. So when I prescribe a peptide, right, it's something that the body is making already. So that's where the foundation of peptides comes back to giving you back something the body's already making, right? So for example, GLP1s or BPC-157, right? These are peptides that were used in the body industry, the weight lifting industry, for muscle repair. The body already makes this. So when you give it back to somebody, right, there's a difference in, again, direct cellular mechanisms or messengers, right, to promoting that uptake and improving that peptide in your body, right, which helps with muscle repair and things like that. Supplements and shampoos and, again, you can call a lot of things a peptide specifically, I guess, but there's a complete difference with taking, a Bonita peptide or something that's in the shampoo and they're just putting peptide on it behind it, versus when you prescribe something that the body's already making. You know what I mean? Like you don't have, like you just said, like you don't have that peptide in your body that the shampoo shows. So it's a supplement, but it's a really sexy word, but there's a huge difference when you're taking something the body's already making for something to improve the cell signaling pathway that the peptide's already doing, right, in the body. We're just reminding it to do it more effectively versus anything that, can technically, and from a supplement standpoint, put peptides on there, right? Again, unfortunately, it's become a word that's, I think, overutilized a little bit. And a lot of peptide companies are, marketing it, which great for them, but it gets very confusing to the consumer for sure.
It does. And okay, so we mentioned the GLP-1. So why don't we just start there?
Yes.
Because I'm very torn on this. So
yes,
I will let you explain and get into it, but I see a lot of benefits. There are people who have been dealing with weight issues for a very long time that are finding success on it. But right now it feels like everybody and their cousin is on it.
Yeah.
And I have concerns about it. So before I bring up my concern questions, why don't you talk about what the GLP-1 does to the body as far as signaling goes, and the history of it and how it's being more used now?
Yes. So GLP-1 is a glucagon-like peptide, okay? As a medication or as an agonist that you're hear everybody talking about taking a GLP-1, it's a medication that essentially is mimicking our body's own GLP-1 production, a hormone that helps your body respond better to the foods that we're eating. So it helps with insulin secretion, it helps decrease glucagon, slow gastric emptying to say like, hey, I'm already full, which helps with weight loss, etc. And these things, again, are not new, right? Like the timeline you had asked about, right? I want to make sure I'm giving you the dates right. So Exenda, which is the first GLP-1, which was used for diabetics, was back FDA approved for 2005, okay? Type 2 diabetes, okay? Liraglutide, which the brand name Victoza for diabetes, Saxenda for weight loss, was FDA approved 2010 through 2014, multiple studies on that. And then semaglutide or Ozempic, right, for diabetes, back approved type 2 diabetes 2017, for weight loss as Wegovy in 2021. And then because of the absolute, the studies and the profound effects in weight loss of semaglutide or Wegovy, 2022 comes around and tirzepatide, Mounjaro for diabetes, and Zepbound for weight loss is FDA approved. So you saw this very fast approval of the second generation, which has a little bit a different peptide combination in the tirzepatide. But so what I like to say is these things are not new, right? Like the first, again, GLP-1 really was discovered back in 1980s of the profound effects it does on the metabolism support. So that's one of the things that I like to discuss to you. These things really aren't new. They've been studied for a long time, actually probably the most well-studied peptides in the entire universe at this point, right? Because of how many people are taking them.
The studies initially were done for people that had, diabetes or, other medical issues, but being used now for just a weight loss drug. Now, that study of the long-term effects for the general public, so to say, have not been studied a little bit. So that seems to be one of the controversies, that we really don't know the long-term effects of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have the initial 2017 for Saxenda, right? 2021, but with any newer medications, right? We don't have a 20-year analysis of things for sure. What we do know is that kind of perspective wise. So yes, your answer to that is correct. We don't have, because it hasn't been out for 20 years yet. Now, to get drugs approved, generally the FDA does a lot behind the scenes. The studies have to be there to get it FDA approved. But you're right, absolutely. Long-term effects, yes.
Okay, so I want to just make sure that we touch base on some of the, we talked about the benefits you mentioned with the glucose, the blood sugar levels, and all those diabetes-related symptoms that it has been used to treat, and now using it for a weight loss drug. Let's just talk a little bit, as we'd mentioned a little bit off the podcast, I have some concerns about the negative side effects, not just symptoms of the drug, but the loss in muscle mass and bone density, and whether you have to be on it for a lifetime if you're not making those lifestyle changes. So can you address those concerns for me?
Totally. And I think those concerns are super valid. Kind of what we were talking about initially. So if I have somebody comes to see me and they're like, listen, my sister, my brother, my brother-in-law, my cousins are all on this medication. They're all losing weight. Fantastic. Okay. But no one goes on the peptide in our office without understanding and looking at blood work, understanding and talking about these very important highlights you're talking about, right? With any weight loss, okay, with any, whether it's GLP-1s, whether it's the Atkins diet, whether it's whatever weight loss method you're doing, if you are not focusing on protein, you will lose muscle mass, right? Caloric deficit without working and, making sure that you're hitting your protein and working out, drinking your water, right? All those things are foundational, right? In terms of maintaining muscle and, decreasing body fat, increasing and maintaining lean muscle mass. Okay. That's with anything though. So that's not just like something particular to GLP-1 medications. What I want to and try to avoid though is fast weight loss, right? Again, with any weight loss, right? If you're losing weight fast, you don't have the time and energy to like restore and maintain muscle. You're also going to lose the weight fast. You're also losing muscle at the same time. So I think that's pivotal, right? And then also like tracking that lean muscle mass, right? We have an in-body machine in our office that we have many of our patients, all of our GLP-1 patients do at some point in their journey, and to continue to track that, right? And then every conversation and checkpoint that we have with patients on these medications is what's your protein level look like? Are you tracking it? If not, we're going to set you up with our health coach to make sure that you're hitting those things. You're keeping track of your water. You're, hitting your 10,000 steps every single day. So I think that's a super valid and important point, because there are many providers that don't have that conversation, right? We were just kind of talking about this a little bit too, and nothing against med spas, but like people that are not proficient and really don't understand what this medication, what this peptide is doing in the body. And they're like, yep, here's this thing. It will make you lose weight. Yeah, it will for most people, but they're not tracking. They're not doing the very foundational important things. So I think that's a very important and valid point that is very much discussed with any of my patients wanting to go on these medications.
So here's my frustration. As you talk about the lifting weights and the eating the protein and tracking your food and drinking the water, but most of those things, before people start the GLP-1s, they're not starting with that. They're not even trying that change in lifestyle before they do the GLP-1s. So that is super frustrating for me, because is being healthy with a stronger muscle mass and lean an easy route? No, not at all. But there are health disadvantages, again, of accelerating that and not making those lifestyle modifications. And you mentioned, doing the continual testing, but if you don't have a coach who's checking in with you even weekly, which obviously a provider doesn't do, it's very hard to hold people accountable and to keep them motivated to make those healthy choices, right? So when I see people that are losing large amounts of weight, I'm very happy that I think it can start momentum for them. It can give them the confidence that they will make progress, because, trying things and having them fail can be discouraging. So in that respect, and again, lowering the blood sugar and all those other good effects I think are good. But I really struggle with those lifestyle changes, because I feel like many of the people who are taking it don't understand the real risk that they're taking by not making those changes.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because so there's lots of reasons that people go on GLP-1s, or like maybe it is somebody who's overweight and they've tried so many different things and they get super frustrated because they don't see the scale move, right? Maybe genetics are against them. Maybe it's, environmental factors they don't even know. Maybe they're holding on to a bunch of mold and they don't even know that. And that's the reason they can't lose weight, right? Postmenopausal women, premenopausal women, right? They have a lot of uphill battles in general, right? Because you can be, insulin resistance usually comes with that. You can have your hormones batting against you. That's the reason you can't lose weight. So that's why the blood work is essential, right? And foundational in our practice, to make sure that we're kind of uncovering all those other bumps in the road that people have, that the reason they can't lose weight. But if you have somebody come in who, is super insulin resistant, right? And now they have hormones against them. Maybe their thyroid's off. Maybe they're, they've been overweight for 25 years and nothing works, or they just gain the weight back. Like there's a lot of things that have to work correctly for the body to lose weight and keep that weight off. So this is, coming to your point of like, well, I have to be on this for my entire life. The answer is absolutely not, right? Like 99% of my patients come off of it once they hit their goal weight, but that's because they're doing the foundational things. But I think for some people, and we've looked at their blood work and we're monitoring, they're optimizing everything else from within, right? That's how you keep the weight off post peptide, is you do the right things. You make sure your blood work looks optimal, your hormones are optimal, everything else, nutrient repletion, all the things. But I think for a lot of people, sometimes 5 pounds is devastating for them, like where they can't lose. And if you don't see the scale moving, I think that's where it helps the people, patients in that regard. But then you have people that have, a family history of diabetes. And so weight loss is not the only benefit, right, of the GLP-1 medications that we know of. And so I think there's a lot of things to consider, but I think too, I mean, some people just give up. So, after so many failed attempts, where I think that's where it becomes life-changing for them. Like even 5 pounds on a scale for some people is super motivating. And I've had plenty of patients that are like, listen, I just needed to I need a kickstart, right? I needed something to just give me that good vibes, that energy to get me started down to okay, I lost 5 pounds and now I'm excited to go to the gym, right? So I think it can be life-changing in that aspect. That is a big conversation I have. I had a patient yesterday that they're like, I don't want, and I was talking to you, they come in and they're like, I don't want anything to do with the GLP-1 medication. And that's totally valid. And I hear that for sure. But when you kind of break it down to a cellular perspective and understand that, for some people who, let's just say weight loss, right? They've been overweight for many years, and I can't tell you from a blood work perspective, how high their heart inflammation, how high their inflammation is in their body. Where taking 10 to 20 to 50 pounds off is life-saving for them, right? So, I totally hear I totally hear that, and I think really depends on the person and how much work they're putting into it. But sometimes that, like I said, that 5 to 10 pounds is super helpful for them, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm super excited. Now I want to get in the gym. I want to make sure. But I think that our health coaches are super valuable in that. I think that's why we, some patients are kind of irritated that we check in with them every 3 months on peptides, and I think that there's a reason for this. Number one, I want to make sure you're doing the right things. Number two, I want to make sure we're hitting your goals. But number three, I want to talk about what's life like after this, because those foundational things have to be in place before, as we start taking patients off and wean off. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just think that's a really important conversation for anybody who's listening, who is on the GLP-1s, who has found success with weight loss and their health, which is what it's meant for, but just to remind them that it's really important that they take care of that muscle part of the equation, because when you lose too much muscle too fast, you're also aging your body faster as well. So there are definitely by your diet and your exercise, you're able to offset some of the negative, effects of the GLP-1 with that quick weight loss. So I just want anybody who's listening who has that question, or maybe just thinks it's important but doesn't really, make the changes to ensure that they're healthy. I just really want people who are listening who are on it to incorporate that into their lifestyle. I'm looking at my research, which may or may not be true, but I did see that reviews of the weight loss, 20 to 40% of the total weight loss can be lean mass. So that's a big portion of your muscles as you age that might be harder to get back. So again, so important that I think people, since it's prescribed and given out so frequently to many people, I just think it's really important to really, coming from a muscle standpoint.
Yeah, right. And I think, muscle is the currency of longevity, right? You'll hear many longevity physicians say that. And you're going to burn fat more effectively with more lean muscle mass. Absolutely. As anytime, it's usually after age 40, it's harder to build muscle, right? And then again, you have all these kind of hormones that if they're not optimized, they can go against you too. And so I think you're absolutely right. That is a huge conversation for somebody who's not only knowledgeable in peptides as a prescriber, right? To make sure that is something. I'm sure my patients, I tell them every single time, I'm just like, I'm so sick. You're probably so sick of hearing me say what's my protein intake? Am I hitting my protein? Am I going to the gym? What's that look like? And I always say but even for patients who just lose weight, right, that are on the peptides, I always say there should be there's going to be a sign behind me that says your peptide is going to work as hard as you do, right? It's like with anything. Most of my patients get to a point if they're not doing those things, and that's why we check in. I'm like, hey, what's your workout? What's your activities look like? What's your diet look like? Because it will only get you so far. So, those last 10 to 20 pounds for people are the most stubborn pounds. And unless you're doing the foundational things, that's how you're going to hit your goals there, but also keep it off, right? And wean off. So there's a lot of ways to do all of it for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you, again, as a functional provider, I know from personal experience that your philosophy is to be hands-on and to follow up. Whereas with, again, standard care or maybe med spas, that approach is not always taken, which again is why I want to put out for that people really take agency over their own health. So when they do choose this route, that they make those right choices. Let's touch real quick on dosage, because I've heard a lot about dosage lately with, there's some skepticism on pharmaceutical companies and the money they make on these drugs, which is causing the scarcity for people who really need it. And then, maybe getting more money off of those high doses where there's now a microdosing approach to that. Can you just cover that a little bit?
So it's not on the shortage list anymore. So I think that concern is, for people that were like worried about that, not valid anymore. Um, I like to microdose pretty much every single one of my patients, to be honest with you. So, when you get this from a regular, your regular primary care doctor and you're getting the medications, right? You have these patients that have these terrible side effects with doses, right? And I think that's where the microdosing of GLP-1s are really effective, right? I always say if patients are on these, I don't want you to have any side effects. This GI stuff, this constipation stuff, I don't want any side effects. I don't even want you to know you're on a GLP-1 medication if you're on it, right? And a lot of that 99.9% of that is due to dose relations, right? So I have some patients that come in and they're like, I've lost 35 pounds. I feel terrible every single day. I'm like, that is terrible medicine, right? You should not even know you're on it. So I think, when it comes to the difference between, the medication you're on is number one, like there are different types of GLP-1 medications, whether it's just strictly a GLP-1, GLP and GIP together, like there's other peptides involved, right? That really kind of helps me dose patients appropriately at the right dose, and avoid side effects at the same time. So it just kind of depends. And again, there's a lot of patients that come to me. I literally, I'm not even making this up. I had a patient come to me before I went on maternity leave, and she's like, I get my semaglutide off of blackmarket.com, like blackmarketsemaglutide.com or whatever it was, right? And this is also like a really valid point, is that there are research only peptides out there that patients can get offline. And I just always say and most of them will say like not for human use, right? Like that is something that like patients, and again, there's lots of ways to get these things nowadays, right? I will just say this, like when I get my pharmacies from a regular pharmacy, like a pharmacy that I very much vet where it's coming from, right? And I know that pharmacy, I know that it's a very clean, effective, like I would eat lunch off their floor pharmacy, right? And their testing and sterility is also tested constantly, their batch testing. That is a whole lot different than cutting anything offline. Like that's just something I don't know what's in there. I'm not testing that substance. I rely on my pharmacy friends who are very intelligent and do this every single freaking day, right? To make sure that it's a very, very good peptide coming off their line, if that makes sense.
I am so glad you brought that up because, as you know, something similar to that happened with me after with BPC 157. I did take it post my shoulder surgery in order to improve recovery, which I honestly believe made a huge difference. I'm about 95% functional at least right now. That's a year and a half later. But I did recommend to someone else who was going through shoulder surgery, and I sent just a link to a BPC 157 just for a reference, and they ordered that one, and it came in and said for animal use only. And I was like, oh no, like that's not what I totally took away any integrity I had. So that is so important that you are getting it from the right source. Now on that real quick, if getting in to see you are so busy now and your availability is not there as much. Well, you have other providers who help as well, but sometimes getting into a functional medicine doctor or provider can take some time and finding the right one. So are there any tips you have for people who are looking to get more information on peptides who don't have to wait, 6 months before getting into a provider?
Yeah. Well, so we definitely, like you had said, we have expanded. So we've hired another PA that started with us last January. We actually just hired another nurse practitioner. She's going to start with us in this coming up January. So we are doing our from our foundational, like in Madison area, doing our best to accommodate that, because I think, again, the other thing that's happening right now, and it's not a bad thing, right? But functional medicine takes years and years to get good at, right? This is not something, looking at what my husband and I spend on continuing education, it's actually kind of nauseating how much money we spend. We're talking like a lot of money to just mentor with the right people, right? But that's something that's very passionate to us. Like I will spend whatever money that I have to learn from the best and how to do this effectively for not only my patients, like myself, like I'm the guinea pig, right? I want to make sure that what we're doing is effective, but very safe at the same time. Functional medicine is something that takes a long time. So I would say like there's more now functional medicine providers across the world, probably 100 times fold than there was even last year, right? And so I think, when it comes to just making sure that the right person, making sure it's a right fit, like have that conversation with the provider. There's a lot of providers that it doesn't take, the only reason it takes a long time for patients to get in with me is because I've been doing this a long time now. Like patients referrals are my number one source of new patients, right? And so that's also the biggest compliment to me though, is like if I have somebody that a lot of people, I see their entire families now, right? Like that's a huge compliment to me because I know I did something right and that person feels very comfortable with me. So I would say a lot of clinics aren't that far out, I would say. And we're doing our best to make it not be that far out for people. But, the providers in our clinic too, like we're very picky about who we bring on, right? So they have to be the right person. We sometimes we waited a year to find our PA, and not that we didn't interview multiple people, but we want the right people and the right fit. And I think when you find a provider, most people they can tell that first kind of time they sit down with that provider, they can feel there's energy, right? Like they feel, how do I feel like this provider can help me and get my goals and take care of me and my family? So, so the answer to your question, I think it's going to depend on how vetted that provider is in terms of how hard it is to get into with them. But also our providers in our clinic, I'm constantly, helping them, teach them, look into this, go to here for peptide, conversation or mentoring. And so I think not a lot of clinics are that far out. We do our best to make sure that we have the right providers and very knowledgeable providers in our clinic to help people get in faster at the same time.
What I love about this podcast is it allows us to get information out there that there are treatment options available that people may hear about but not understand. So hopefully with this conversation, we're able to answer some of the questions and bring up some of the concerns for people that are leery about it, and just good information to know, because there's so much information out there. You don't know really what to believe or how to move forward, with your own health journey, right? Whether it be weight loss or, injury recovery or longevity, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we wrap up with peptides, is there any information or one question that you get regularly that you'd like to put out there for information for anyone who's, either on it or thinking of going on it?
There's a peptide for everything. I'll say that, right? There's peptides for muscle repair. There's peptides for brain health. There's peptides for gut health. There's peptides for anything, right? It's a huge reason I study them consistently. But I would say in general, right, if you're thinking about going on it or you're hesitant to go about it on it, again, it's not for everybody. I have plenty of patients that come in, they're like, I don't want to even talk about it. I'm like, absolutely, we don't have to. There's plenty of other things. We'll clean up the cells. We'll get your hormones optimized. We'll make sure you're not nutrient, depleted. We'll talk about strength training. We'll talk about, all the other foundational things. But if they are on the fence about it or going on, thinking about doing it, I would say from my perspective, weight loss is not even the first thing I think about for GLP-1s anymore, right? It is probably the most anti-inflammatory thing that I can give somebody, right? To not only help their inflammation in their body, to, help their cholesterol, to help blood pressure, to help, their inflammation in their body. So I use it for a variety of different things. I think when it comes down to patients is that the dose matters, right? You should never have side effects. And you should be monitoring blood levels, looking at blood work, right, from time to time with a provider that understands what this medication is doing and how to avoid side effects, and using it to your best availability, your best ability in your body to work effectively. So I think there's, just doing it the right way is very, very effective. But I don't think there's so many reasons to utilize them, not only for weight loss nowadays.
That's great information. Again, research, the dosage and your goals, and talk to a professional instead of just going on it willy-nilly and not making changes. That's my soapbox that I've kind of brought up every aspect of this conversation. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you came back with us today to talk about peptides, because again, it's one of those things that, you hear everywhere, and I just think it's really important to have a conversation. So I'm so grateful for you to make time in your busy schedule to have our listeners get this information. I'm going to wrap up. So we had a conversation with you already a year ago, and I can't ask the same question, so I had to tweak my final question a little bit. Let's see if we can try this one. If you could revisit one moment from your life, not to change it, but to understand it better, what moment would you choose?
Erica, these are always so thoughtful, and I feel like I need a day to think about that. Okay. One moment in my life, and not to change it, but to rethink about it, to understand it better. I was a huge athlete growing up. I think for me, I'm gonna go there because it's something I think about often, and kind of how I kind of came back from that. But I would go back to my college career in sports, honestly. I know it sounds a little bit wild, but and again, maybe if I had more time to think about this, I'd come up with a better answer. But this is what I'm thinking about right now, because it's something that I think about often, is just knowing what I know now, and my life now, again, not that I would change it, but I think just going back to like a post major injury, right? How I would have changed, not change it, but like kind of thought about it differently, what that did for my future health. It changed the trajectory of my life and what I did post injury, just in terms of even like getting to me where I am now, right? Like I think things would have been a little bit different if I would have stayed playing sports and continued to battle through my last career-ending injury. So I think about that often a lot. And just now what I know now, like coming back to like how I would have healed post-recovery, I'm like, man, I could have come back from the ACL injury. Like I would have been back on the court, so much faster if I would have known now. But that's just a time in my life that like kind of, it changed me personally, right? Coming back from that, very humbling. I think about that a lot.
I talk to a lot of athletes and coaches, and even like my kids, when that chapter ends, you have to go through this grief process. And I think for 100%. Many people, you look back at it and you have the what ifs, but like you said, you can kind of see how that changed the trajectory and how you use that. So my second part of the question was, how can you, or have you used that impact to your life now? And how are you going to approach your future knowing how that changed?
It's changed me in the fact that like we work with a lot of younger athletes, and I can tell them, from a physical perspective, I can help them battle and recover, right? From a personal perspective, though, I think, it gave me, it's like with everything, right? Like I'm always the guinea pig. I think I can relate to a lot of my patients in the fact that I know what it is to have a career-ending injury. Like to think that, I was going to the WNBA from the time I was 8, right? Like that was happening, right? And so like I think that I had to, emotionally kind of, again, like you said, like grieve that process, right? And I think I still kind of grieve it at times now. Like I, have those conversations with my kids. So I'm like, you can be whatever you want to be. Like, if, he always asks me like, do you think you're better than Kobe Bryant? And I'm like, it's probably the one person that's probably a little bit better than me in basketball, but like, I'll give him that. But that's, confidence, right? But I think it's helped me help other patients, right? And, my athletes, my older athletes, like, again, recovery or repair is everything, especially as you're, if it's not the basketball court, like I want to go out and be the best dang golfer there is now. I'm never a golfer, but I want to be the best golfer there is. So I think it's a lifetime of knowing, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think just one note on that, not only is it the best basketball player or the best golfer, people that I talk to that are successful have a mindset where they want to be that best mother, that best provider, that best, whatever it may be. But along that route, what we find is that we are best equipped to help the person that we once were. And I think if everybody takes that mindset and uses that to impact people, then the world is a much better place.
I love that. That's great.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for joining me. We are going to have you back when we have another medical conversation that we need your expertise on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. I love what you're doing. This is amazing.
Thanks for listening to my Fit Tribe podcast. Tune in weekly for our latest episode for more health and wellness insights and inspiration. For more information, visit myfittribe.org. Please note that the opinions and comments presented here are those of the guests and do not necessarily constitute medical advice or the opinions of My Fit Tribe. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved. This podcast is a production of My Fit Tribe, LLC. The My Fit Tribe podcast is recorded and produced by Jake Johnson at Paradigm Productions in Madison, Wisconsin. Don't forget to download, subscribe, and follow the My Fit Tribe podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thank you for your support.